Kenneth Deffeyes, Hubbert's Peak, The Impending World Oil Shortage. In the book, Hubbert's Peak, The Impending World Oil Shortage, Kenneth Deffeyes highlights MKingHubbert's groundbreaking theory on the peak of global oil production. In the 1950s, Hubbert predicted that U.S. oil production would peak in the early 1970s, a statement that was initially met with skepticism. However, as history proved him right, experts have been examining whether this concept could be applied to predict global oil production peaks and the subsequent economic, political, and environmental impact. In this summary, we explore oil reserves, the oil industry's psychology, and alternative sources of energy. While political leaders have yet to fully embrace the issue, the book emphasizes the importance of proactive planning for energy conservation and alternative energy development.
The inevitable Hubbert's Peak. In the book, the author discusses Hubbert's Peak, which is based on the trajectory of oil supply in the coming years. While it may seem like the name of a geological formation suitable for adventurous spirits, it actually forecasts a decline in the world's oil supply. MKingHubbert, the man behind this peak theory, predicted in 1956 that U.S. oil production would reach a peak in the early 1970s, a forecast that came true, making him not only an esteemed geophysicist and geologist but also a visionary. Today, we face the same reality. We are experiencing a sluggish economic growth alongside turmoil in the Middle East. This is why it is essential that planning for increased energy conservation and designing alternative energy sources should begin years before the crisis actually happens. The book predicts the peak year for world oil production will happen somewhere between 2004 and 2008, based on other analysts' extensions of Hubbert's approach. These projections will have enormous implications for economics, energy policy, and international politics. Despite being widely reported in scientific publications, the information hardly reaches political leaders' attention, who instead are failing to address the issue at hand. Neither the poorest nations nor the richest can escape the need for fuel, even they need fuel to drive their irrigation pumps. Therefore, with the prospect of industrialized nations bidding up the price of a dwindling world oil supply, we face a bleak future. Nevertheless, Hubbert's prediction has become a touchstone for some conservationists, with the promise of putting less carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Still, the downside is that many will have to rethink personal transportation or continue to face the rising fuel prices. It's all downhill from there unless we take the necessary steps now and develop alternative forms of energy. The book's message is simple: the Hubbert's Peak is inevitable, and there's an urgent need for action. Hubbert's Peak and the reality of oil reserves. The concept of oil reserves is a key component of Hubbert's Peak, but how accurate are they? The reserves are defined as future production expectations relying on existing technology from already drilled wells. However, petroleum engineers tend to underestimate them. In the late 1980s, OPEC nations announced significant reserve increases, which were linked to their market share. This suggests that estimates may be subjective. Despite this, world governments are not exploring oil reserves vigorously, perhaps due to the psychology of the oil business where 9 out of 10 wells turn out to be dry holes. Although companies spend millions looking for exploration prospects before drilling, only 1 in 100 attempts discovers an important oil field. While oil executives tend to be optimistic, optimism alone cannot counter a decline in world oil production. Petroleum 101. Petroleum, a carbon atom chain with hydrogen atoms, naturally breaks apart into simpler molecules as temperature increases. These chains vary in length and determine the products they become, with the shortest chain being natural gas, and the longest, waxy substances. Hydrocarbons are of natural origin, produced by plants and animals, forming organic deposits that geologists have become increasingly clever at finding. In modern times, exploration technology is sophisticated and driven by computers, but there are still no guarantees of success. The inevitability of oil production decline. Oil production follows a bell curve that rises, peaks, and then declines due to diminishing reserves. While some propose alternative methods like drilling deeper or exploring new oil fields, these solutions have limitations. Oil production is a phenomenon that can be plotted on a bell curve. It gradually rises towards the middle of the graph, reaches a peak, and eventually declines. This pattern applies to all forms of energy deposits such as coal and oil. Although there are unusual circumstances that can affect the graph, none of them changes the inevitable depletion of oil reserves. Higher oil prices may incentivize greater exploration, but that assumption relies on more deposits of crude oil waiting to be discovered. However, during the Great Depression, oil cost $1 per barrel, yet it was also the era of the most significant oil discovery in the history of America. This fact emphasizes the independent nature of the bell curve phenomenon. Many ask what can be done about the inevitable decline in oil production. 3 possible alternatives have been proposed. The first involves looking for a new place to drill. Although geologists have explored remote areas, the South China Sea remains unexplored due to political claims by 6 different countries. Additionally, the prospect for major oil reserves appears to be limited. The second alternative is drilling deeper into the earth. However, this solution has its limitations. There is an oil window, a range of depths with geological conditions in which oil will form, and temperatures continuously increase with depth. At around 15,000 feet, oil molecules transform into natural gas molecules. Rigs capable of drilling past 15,000 feet have been in operation since 1938, implying that no drilling stone has been left undrilled. The third alternative is new technology, which has been heralded as the panacea that will save society from the valley that follows the peak of the Hubbert curve. The oil technology revolution happened in the 1980s following earlier disruptions of oil supplies, costing a large amount of money. While there is a possibility of finding more efficiencies, new disruptive methods are not expected to be invented. Lastly, accelerating exploration can help mitigate the inevitable decline in oil production. However, this process takes time, as it takes an average of 10 years for a newly found green field to produce the first oil delivery. This means that physical and economic practicalities govern how fast this process can advance. In conclusion, the bell curve phenomena of oil production is a reality. Although options such as exploring new oil fields, drilling deeper, or implementing new technology can slow down the process, they have limitations. Alternative sources of energy should be pursued as oil production inevitably declines. Preparing for the inevitable oil shortage. The book discusses the potential for inevitable oil shortages and offers solutions, including nuclear energy and alternative energy sources, to mitigate the impact. The looming threat of an oil shortage presents a gloomy prospect that could lead to rationing, long lines at service stations, and an upsurge in inflation due to increased transportation costs that would make basic commodities more expensive. Could there be anything done to avoid such a fate? Potentially yes, if society is willing to make appropriate investments. The book suggests that society should reduce its dependence on oil and work toward greater energy conservation by using fuel-efficient cars, less energy-hungry factories, and developing alternative energy sources. While nuclear energy is considered a controversial solution, it does not release harmful carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and has a supply of uranium that could last a century. Solar and wind power are also considered, but their high material costs make them an expensive option at present, so neither is an immediate solution to the energy problem. While some may argue that ignoring the problem is an option, the book warns that it is illogical to assume that oil production will continue to increase forever. Instead, it is suggested that society plan for a future with limited oil, preparing for the inevitable oil shortage by developing viable options rather than waiting until the crisis is imminent. The book cautions that neither radical environmentalism nor blindly continuing on the same path are realistic solutions to the challenge at hand.
As the world moves closer to Hubbert's peak, concerning the inevitable decline in global oil production, it becomes crucial to start looking for viable solutions. This book's summary highlights the urgency of addressing an impending energy crisis, whose impact will go beyond oil prices to shape the world's economic, social, and environmental landscapes. Kenneth Deffeyes calls for a more forward-looking and proactive approach from governments, industries, and individuals by focusing on energy conservation, fuel-efficient technologies, and alternative energy sources. In the face of dwindling oil reserves, momentum towards a global energy transition is not only necessary but inevitable. The book serves as a timely reminder that strategic planning and adaptation are critical in warding off the severe consequences of our over-reliance on oil.